Hello viewers, within Gran Turismo 7 we have the new super license tests, and in order to unlock these you need to have done National B, A, International B, International A. If you haven't done that yet, I have a video for it, but let's jump straight into the first one. So yes, let's begin with S1, Honda Civic, around Mount Panorama. Now the first things I noticed with this car is understeer in general. That is on the power and going into the corners. But here I braked way too late into the first corner using my sort of group 3 braking reference, which is about 75 meters, so I retried that one. And here I was on a pretty good lap. Coming into the chase, I braked on the 150, again my group 3 reference braking point, and you can see it's quite clearly wrong, so don't do that. So here is my best lap. And as again, I said just a moment ago, the car understeers quite a lot on the way into the corner, and then when you get back on the power on the way out of the corner, it understeers there as well. So just make sure you really get the car rotated, be patient, then get back on the power to make sure you don't have to come back off of it on the way out of the turn. Now I am going to say the word patience and maximize track limits 5 million times in this video, but that is the key to success in the master license tests. So approaching turn 2 here, braking on the 100 board, getting the car over that little, there's a small sort of banking middle of the corner there. Get it really into the apex. And you really do have to capitalise on getting close to the wall, but also the undulation of the track here. It's quite banked, so you really do want to get as close as you can to the inside. So as we head up the hill, getting over to the left, turning in by the tree, you might want to lift slightly through this corner. I lifted twice. We've got a fast couple of left-handers coming up. This left-hander should be flat, but then this left might want to have a couple of comfort lifts. Get close to the wall on the exit. Just avoid the curb, but turn in just before the crest of the hill. Make sure the car's already going into that corner. This is the really difficult part of the lap. Edge into that left area to get a better run here. Brake sharp, come off the brake and then back on it again. Run the wall really close and then dip down, really get close to the wall on the left. To really carry the speed through that sector of the track. And on the right hander here, wait for the blue barrier on the right hand side to begin, and that's where you're going to pretty much start braking. Third gear on the exit, and we are now heading towards the chase. Obviously this bit's quite easy, it's a straight line, all you got to do is accelerate. It's not that hard really, but then it's about trying to get your braking point dead right for the chase. And it's quite soon after the kink, so you're going to start braking on the 200, which is the first board on the right hand side. So through the kink, look for the board, there it is, brake on the 200, keep in a straight line, then finally turn in over that apex, back on the power. Again, it understeers on power, but if you get the line right, then you should be okay. Then one corner remaining, back over to the right hand side, braking just before the 100 board. That might have been quite safe, but I knew that this would be a decent lap. Out of the corner in third gear towards the line, and it's going to be 226.5, so about 2.5 seconds quicker than the gold requirement. Moving to S2, this was quite an unusual combination. The Porsche 911 Turbo around the Catalunya Rallycross circuit. So you're going to start off on this sort of feeder lane here, don't know what the correct term is, as you then approach the start of the lap. Now you can see my hilarious first attempt here as I turn right, obviously way too early, and go straight into the wall. So obviously don't do that. And here at the final chicane, it's quite easy to cut that corner, so definitely don't do that. Now here's my best attempt. So of course the timer starts as soon as you go past that sort of double barrier there. So it's really about getting the car sideways, getting back on the power, and getting that back end round. Of course the Porsche with the sort of mid rear engine really does sort of get that weight round, and you can really capitalize on that again by getting on the power. So getting the car sideways, keeping that power pinned down, back towards the final sector here. Quite a short lap. Obviously you're on tarmac here, so the car does grip quite a lot, so you don't really need to slide it as such here. Keep 2 wheels within that red and white curb, don't cut that corner as I did earlier. Then the final chicane, you really got to get the car sideways. I didn't really do it on this attempt. I keep it nice and narrow, don't hit the wall of course. And that was that. So that was good enough by about 3/4 of a second. Not the tidiest lap, but it was only my second attempt. S3 is the classic Formula 1 car, the Honda, around Barcelona, around Catalonia. And this one, this car is quite clunky, should we say. And that's usually the case with these classic cars. And so third and fourth is the gears you'll mostly want to be using for most of these corners. This one, you can see I braked way too late for the hairpin. But despite that, this lap was still good enough for gold. So there's definitely room for error on these tests. So I would actually say that the gold requirement isn't overly strict, but still not easy. So heading towards turn 1, of course turning the ghost on. I always turn my personal ghost on, and that's probably something you're going to have to do on these tests. Turn your ghost on so you have a reference point of what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. So through the first corner, you have to be really gentle applying the power back on this car, because it has so much power that it will easily slide if you apply it too quickly. Patience through turn 3, waiting to get back on the power to drive back out in as straight a line as possible. Braking just before the bridge, the gantry there. Go nice and early into the corner. Coming out of here in third gear, and as I said, third and fourth are the gears you kind of want for the most part in this test. Moving back over to the right hand side, down to third. Don't bother with second. It just kind of keeps it nice and settled in these gears. And just really trying to underdrive the car, make sure it's not sliding about all over the place. Heading towards turn 6 and 7. Again, maximising the track limits. Driving over the exit quite nicely in a straight line. Then turn 9 up the hill. Patience mid-corner. Again, I said that word, but you just got to kind of lift off and just wait for the car to rotate. Then get back on the power. Now, the braking point for this is just before the 100 board. Let's say about 125 metres before the corner. And you see the ghost sailing very wide there. And I've probably just saved myself a second by getting that right. So my overall synopsis of this lap is that you just kind of got to keep it really nice and tidy. This car is one that is very easy to overdrive and push too hard. And you kind of got to tune that down a bit. Make sure your inputs are nice and smooth and consistent and tidy. And the car will reward you with a decent lap time. So through the final couple of corners, obviously very fast corners, not quite flat out, but nearly. That's going to be a 49.6, so more than 2 seconds better than the gold requirement time. S4 is the Jaguar XJ220. So quite a heavy but powerful road car. Lovely car. Now this is my first attempt. Coming through this left kink in towards turn 1. Braking on the 400 board. I think that's a little bit too late. You can see they're sailing quite wide of the apex, so not the ideal line. But just bearing that in mind for my proper run in a moment. So that lap was a 201.9, which was good enough for gold by a second and a half. But I wanted to go again and see what I could do. This attempt, though, I tried to cut the middle sector a bit too much, so watch out for that. Don't cut that middle sector. There's definitely a tendency or an urgency to try and cut those corners and shorten the line, but you don't really want to do that too much. So braking on the 500 board this time. As I touched upon, this car is quite heavy, quite clunky, but very powerful. So you're approaching corners very quickly, so the brakes aren't the best. You have to brake quite early. Opening up this left-hander, get the weight on the nose by braking, waiting quite a long time to get back on the power. All over the track limits there. Braking on the 400 board, roughly. I do go a little bit wide here, so do take that with a pinch of salt, but around about the 400 to 450, I'd say, before that hairpin. That should get you in there quite nicely. And then you have the very complicated and technical middle sector, where this car doesn't necessarily excel because it is so heavy. But again, make the most of the track limits, running to the wall. Just dipping 2 wheels onto the sort of grey curb on the inside. That's kind of what you're looking at, what you're aiming for on a lot of these corners as a reference point. Obviously you have the white line around the edge of the track, but kind of look beyond the white line towards the edge of the tarmac. That's really what you're aiming for, to really maximise the width of the circuit. Then you've got to be really patient through this long left into the long right, accelerating pretty much just as the barrier begins on the right hand side. And as we head towards the little complex here at the end of the lap, braking about 250 metres before the corner, trail braking in, carry the speed in towards the apex, patience mid-corner, waiting, then trying to set up a nice exit here from the chicane, driving up the curb on the first and especially the second bit, running slightly wide over the white line. Now for this right-hander, you should be flat out. Through the left, you might want to lift slightly to give yourself a better run into this right-hander, turning in pretty much at the beginning of the shadow as you enter the tunnel, and that should get you around that corner quite nicely. Back on the power as early as possible, running to the line in a straight line. It's a 2 minutes 0.3, 1:59 is definitely possible around there, and quite happy with that lap. 3 seconds quicker than the required time. S5, I think this is one of the more difficult ones on the new snow circuit. Now, bit of advice, go into settings and just turn down the exposure correction, and that will stop you from being blinded by the snow, which is quite useful. So I find that if you're blind, then, well, you can't see, so you can't drive very well, can you? So here, this very long right-hander at the end of the first sector is one that I crashed on many times, and it's not the easiest corner to get right. But let's take a look at this lap attempt. Now, through the first corner, you want to take the wide line. You have to take this wider line. Getting on the power, pretty much on that blue line is kind of where you want to be. If not a bit wider than that, you can carry so much more speed if you do that. With this little sequence, keeping over to the right to give yourself a more open run through this left-hander and a better exit speed. That's the first sector done in under 30 seconds, and this is the difficult right-hander which tightens up and tightens up. So really getting on that power, and then you can actually use the brake or the throttle to rotate the car. Just really turn into that one quite aggressively. And then this left-hander, you want to kind of throw it in quite hard and go up the banking, and the banking really helps you around and gives you better speed off of the turn as well. And that's pretty much the best way to take that, I would say. So we have another long radius right-hander here, turning in at the top of that crest. And then once you're into the slide, it's a case of just holding the power and holding the steering. I do go a bit wide here, so maybe a bit too much power on this occasion. But that's the general gist of how to take that corner. For the left here, off camber, I do have to slow down quite a bit. I wasn't quite as close to the inside as I would have liked. And then the last two corners are quite slow and clumsy. So it's a case of really just rotating the car on the brakes. So braking and turning quite hard at the same time to get the back end round, and then back on the power immediately to keep the back end sliding. And then driving off the final turn in as straight as line as you can towards the line. This was going to be a 1 minute 40.0. There it is, and yeah, that's more than 1.7 seconds clear, so not too bad. S6, the Porsche 911 GT1 Strassen version around Road Atlanta. Now this one was quite tricky, not the easiest test at all. You need to get a good run for that final corner at the beginning of your lap. So definitely bear in mind that the final corner before your lap starts is still very important. I went very wide at turn 1, and that's obviously not ideal. Getting a massive moment of oversteer. Despite that, the lap was still good enough for gold by 1/10, so again there is room to play with on these tests. On the second attempt, you can see I quite easily went past the Ghost. This attempt was a bit quicker by, well, more than a second actually. And then this is my best attempt on my third lap, as again trying to get a good exit through the final corner. As we approach turn 1, braking just before the change of tarmac on the left hand side, getting the car in towards that apex. I don't quite manage it as well as I could have done. You don't need to go fully to the left because it doesn't give you a good run into this left-hander here. Making the most of the curb on the right here. And actually there's quite a lot of grip on this car. It's very powerful, quite grippy as well. So through the S's you shouldn't have too much trouble. Take a bit of grasp on that left-hander if you have to. And then this corner here is one of the most difficult ones, but most important. Really do have to maximise the track limits on the exit, going over the curb. As long as you keep your left wheels on the curb, then you should be okay. Turning in nice and early, for turn 6. Turn 7 is quite clunky and quite clumsy, but coming out of there in third gear, I think, gives you a nice run. Use the curb on the exit to give yourself a better angle through the exit of that corner and better traction. And then you have one big braking zone remaining on the lap, which is of course into the chicane. Not easy to judge this one as we head down the hill. Braking pretty much halfway down the hill, I think that's the best way to describe it. As we turn into the apex, third gear here on the way in and on the way out. Bit of oversteer, but it's not too bad. Over the crest, up into fourth, and then the fearsome final corner, approaching very wide and aiming for that very late apex. You can carry a lot of speed. You kind of sacrifice the end of your lap as you go over the grass on the exit to get a slightly better time. Onto S7, Watkins Glen in the Shelby Cobra. And it's another car that has a lot of understeer on the brakes and not the best brakes. So a lot of these tests were in very powerful cars which don't handle the best. And you can see they're braking way too late. You want to brake on pretty much the 400 board for this first corner. That will get you in quite nicely to that turn. Now this first attempt, or second attempt you could say, was okay. It was good enough for gold. Making the most of the available circuit here at the bus stop chicane. At the end of the lap it was 206.1, so 1/10 good enough for gold. Now this was quite easy to do here, going through the S's, the uphill sequence. I lifted off the power and the back end wanted to come around, so be really careful about your lifting off the power. Anyway, into turn 1, braking on the 400, kind of trail braking in at the end of the braking phase, then back on the power. Really make the most of the track. You can keep 2 wheels, as long as you've got 2 wheels on that red and yellow, you're fine. You can go wider. So getting in nice and early. This car, I think you do have to turn it in quite nicely and early. It doesn't, it's not the most responsive car. So let's say, certainly compared to a Group 3 car, you want to turn in quite early, because it's one of those that just takes a while to really generate the turning force that you need. Turning in very early to that, really getting all over the curbs here on all 4 parts of the bus stop chicane to really minimise the travel distance. Patience mid-corner on this long right-hander. You see the back end really wanted to come around, so you really do have to be careful with applying the power in this car. Braking before the 200, and again turning in early, getting towards that curb. If you turn in too late, this car just never quite gets towards the apex. So just turn in nice and early. Braking on the 200, turning in a bit too late there, in fact. Trying to make the most of the camber on the exit, trying to straighten up the exit as a result, but that was definitely turning in a bit too late. Back end wanted to kick around on the exit, definitely improving against the Ghost. In towards this right-hander, braking about 220 metres before the corner, just before the 200 board. Patience mid-corner, running the full extent of the track on the exit. As long as you keep two tyres on the red and yellow curb, then you're okay. And again, just waiting, gently applying the power, driving off the turn in a straight line. We only have 2 corners remaining on the lap, turning in just before the 100 board. That was actually a bit wide. You can make the most again of the curb, so I've said it multiple times, but as long as you keep 2 tyres on the red and yellow, you can go a bit wider. And then trying to run the wall on the exit. So not the best lap, but it's not too bad. It was a 2:05.4 and about a second quicker than the gold time. I would say that was quite a hard test. Master S8, this one was thoroughly enjoyable. The Mercedes CLK GTR, very cool car. Now this was my first attempt, and I just carried a bit too much speed through that corner on the exit. On my second attempt, because of that, I compensated too much and took the inside and hit the bollard. On this attempt, got on the power way too soon on the exit of La Source. But this is my best lap, my actual first attempt at completing the lap. Braking at the 100 board, braking a straight line, then as you trail off the brakes, carry it in. Going in first gear, but coming out in second for better traction. And through Eau Rouge and Radion, you should be flat out. So approach from the right hand side, of course, take the curb at the bottom of the hill, and then just turn in. Even there, I was still a couple of metres away from the apex, but I was easily able to carry that flat out. Then you're on the Kemmel straight, approaching from the left hand side, of course, waiting for the 100 boards, which is pretty much at the end of the curb on the left. There it is. And at the end of the braking phase, carrying the speed into the corner. So you're braking in a straight line, coming off the brake and turning in at the same time, just to really bleed that braking phase into the turning phase. Coming down the hill, braking at the end of the curb on the left, going in early, squaring back off the corner, coming out in second, staying in third for this one. You can see there a bit of coasting mid-corner, just to let the car rotate before getting back on the power. Then we have Pouon, very difficult corner, approaching on the curb, and again you see that lifting mid-corner, lifting off the power for about a second just to let the car turn and rotate before accelerating out of the corner, braking on the shadow, going into this chicane, a bit wide but could have turned in a bit earlier I think. Going for a slightly later apex, make the most of the track on the exit, the curb there, back over to the left. And this is where I made my mistakes earlier, making the most of the curb there and on the exit, turning in on the curb. I just played this one nice and safe by not going too far onto the apex. We then have a couple of corners remaining, and through not Radion, this is Blanchimont, I should say. You should be able to go flat. I was actually playing it incredibly safe there, so I lifted off, braking about 120 meters before the corner. Carry that speed into that curb. Really abuse that first curb. Get all over it. That's what you want to do. You save a lot of time by doing that. Approaching the line, 206.2. So nearly 3 seconds quicker than gold, but I think I could have gone quicker. S9. Now this one is a very fearsome test. The Aston Martin Valkyrie. Now, point of note, you want to map the overtake button on your controller or your wheel because you'll want to be using it on this test. Now, this car is incredibly powerful, and it kind of fits the theme of these super license tests where they're very fast in a straight line, but the brakes aren't the best as a result. None of these cars are race cars, really, apart from the last test. Well, the one before was a race car, but most of them aren't. So this time, I was trying to adjust my braking point for the third corner there. Braking pretty much at 200 meters before the corner. Good enough for gold, 122.5. But this was not an easy test. This one, I mean, I got a gold there, but I really wanted to go better than that. And so if you deploy your power while the car is still turning, especially with the overtake button as well, you're asking for the car to spin out. So you have to do it quite smoothly. And you know, even if you have to wait half a second to deploy the overtake, there's nothing wrong with that. Just make sure the car is nice and settled before accelerating. In the name of trying to improve my time, I was really taking turn one wrong quite a lot of times. You see that it's a very strict track limit on the exit. You can't go two wheels into the green area. You have to keep two wheels on the red and white curb at all times, and that's pretty much the rule for this circuit. Keep two wheels within the red and white and you're okay. So that time, just really focusing on the exit speed compared to the entry speed, and as you can see, we're pulling away from the Ghost. Coming up towards turn 3, approaching in a nice line, and then braking 150 meters before the corner, carrying the speed in, coasting through the mid corner, exiting in 4th gear. And I think that's the right gear for the most part. 3rd gear, the wheels seem to really spin up quite horribly in this car. So come out in 4th and you get a better run. Kind of shows you how quick this car is coming out of these corners. Even that, a hairpin there in 4th gear. Because it is so fast, so powerful, anything lower, you've got too much power. The car just wants to slide and wants to spin up its wheels, which is not what you want. So through this middle sector, this is where the corners are. You've got to be really patient through here. And then deploying the power in a straight line off the exit there towards the final corner, really maximising the track limits because the car is so powerful. Braking 100 meters before the corner, could have got on that curb a bit more. But again, running the curb on the exit, two wheels within the red and white and you're okay. And through the final turn, we took it quite nicely, especially compared to the Ghost. And there's a 21.3, so about 1.8 quicker than gold. There's definitely time in that one, but we're going to move on to S10. This is it, the final super license test, and this one most certainly is a race car. Ayrton Senna's McLaren from the late 80s. I say Ayrton Senna, it was also Alan Prost's race car. Either way, this test is very difficult. This car is not the most cooperative, I think it's fair to say. It feels very much on edge a lot of the time. Through Degna 2 here, trying to carry a bit too much speed and running wide. On the next attempt, just underdriving the car a bit more and just staying within the track limits. I was then able to bring home a silver time by 1/10. On this attempt, I quite hilariously binned it before I even started the lap, so you've got to be really careful deploying the power because it has so much power, kind of like the previous test. Now this attempt, slightly better, just coming out there, just lifting off the power nice and gently just to make sure we don't upset the rear end of the car. Crossing the line, 42.4 across the finish. This is my best lap. Let's take a look. And your exit speed from this chicane does determine your speed towards the first corner, so you want to take this nice and nice and considered on the exit of that chicane there, exiting in third gear. I actually was slightly slower than my personal best, but we're not going to worry about that for the time being. First couple of corners, turning in on the 50 board, really carrying that speed through turn 1. Turn 2 is really where the cornering properly begins. And then through the S's, I mean, this is again really a case of just getting as close to the curb on the inside as possible. Bit of coasting mid-corner just to let the car settle in the turn. Gently applying the power, 4th gear out of that turn. Using quite high gears in these high-powered cars to minimise the wheel spin and to give yourself a smoother run on the exit of the corner. Degner 1 carrying the speed, Degner 2 obviously carrying a bit less speed, but running the curb on the exit. That's quite a nice run on the way out of there. 45.8, split 1. Braking on the end of the curb on the right hand side into the hairpin, exiting in 2nd gear. 1st gear isn't, I mean, it just gives you too much wheel spin, so 2nd at a minimum on the exit there. Coming towards Spoon, of course entering from the right hand side, braking on the tarmac pathway on the right hand side just before the 50 boards, waiting and waiting and waiting, coming out in 3rd gear, gently applying that power, and we are slowly but surely pulling away from the Ghost. Now through 130R, of course approach from the right, this corner is easily flat out. You can even keep to the left hand side slightly here. Braking on the 150 or just after the 150. Turn in over the curb. Same for the left hander. 3rd gear on the exit. And to save about half a tenth, just keep the car to the right hand side at the finish. And that is that. 41.9. And not an easy test at all. Not an easy test at all. But that is the Super Master license acquired. Now, as ever, the car you use in the final test is the car that you will unlock for free. So they will hand you over the MP4/4 88. There it is. And now we have the ultimate bragging rights of having all of the license center complete with the super license done. But thank you so much for watching this one, guys. Hope you found it useful. I'll catch you next time. Goodbye.